Kia ora everybody and welcome to the Pitch Perfect podcast. We are a flesh and blood podcast that aims to educate, empower and support the female community in flesh and blood. We're your hosts, Elaine. Say hi, Elaine.
Hi.
And Melody. And today we are joined by one of the OG, the original content creators for Flesh and Blood, someone you may know from Session Blood, and someone who actually now works for LSS as a game dev or game developer. Please welcome Kieran. It's great to have you here this morning with us, Kieran.
Hey, how's it going? Very nice to be on. Thank you for inviting me to jump on the podcast. I'm a big fan. So when you reached out, Melody, I was a little bit flattered, to be honest.
Oh, no, I'm flattered that you said yes. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's cool.
Yeah, I'm flattered that you said that you're here, and then also you said you're a fan. I'm like,
people listen to us, Elaine. We've got people that listen.
I know that's exciting, but also like, yeah, I don't know. Anytime someone reaches out and says that they're a fan or they enjoyed an episode, I just love that. Makes it everything feel worth it and good.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we're gonna dig in, and Kieran, we're really interested in your flesh and blood journey, like overall, like how you got into the game, how you became a content creator, and also how you came to join the Legend Story Studios team. And quite a few of our listeners or viewers are really interested in all of that as well. So first, tell us a little bit about how you came to play Flesh and Blood.
Yep. So, this is a story I've told a couple of times, so I've got it pretty down these days.
Okay, cool.
So, basically, I feel like, a lot of Flesh and Blood players came from previous card games. So, basically, my friend Tom Penny, a.k.a. the Warrior King, as we call him, his little nickname. So, he had heard about this game very early on in like 2019 when it first came out, and he played a few sealed decks. He'd gone out and bought some product, and he was raving about it to us. So at the time, Carol and I were living in a flat together. I forget what the American term is for a flat, but like a shared house kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we were living together, and Tom would always just say, you guys got to try this game. And we said, we're done with card games. We play a little bit of Magic stuff casually, but that's about it. And then eventually he managed to wear us down. So he got Carol first, and I walk into the living room or the dining room, and he's playing this game. And I see this like equipment set up, and he's like, "Oh, those are your equipment. They start and play. This is your deck." And I'm like, "Equipment? What is this nonsense? No, thank you." No. And then I sort of, I left and I came back in. And I was kind of just like looking over. I'm like, "Oh, that actually looks kind of fun." And then Tom said, "Hey, do you want to sit down and play a game? I've got a sealed deck built for you already." And I was like, "Okay." And I still remember it to this day. He gave me a Guardian sealed deck, and with all the equipment, I had the Goliath Gauntlet, the Hardened Cross Strap. And he was just running me through the rules. We sit down, we play, and then I would go sort of turn one, a red slogism into regurgitating slog dominated. So I hit him for like 14 or 12 or something on turn one. And I'm like, man, this game isn't so bad after all. and
he was dead next
after playing that. Yeah, I got him in like 2 or 3 turns. It was great. And then after that, I was like, oh, yeah, maybe this is something I'll just play a little bit casually, probably strictly limited. I'm not going to get into the whole thing of buying cards again. And then 2 days later, I went online and bought probably $400 worth of cards. I got my Mask Momentum, my Find Out Spring Tunic, all my Ninja Majestics, and I was a Katsu man from day one.
I was just gonna say I love hearing people's origin stories, especially when there's someone as involved in Flesh and Blood as you are right now, being like, well, when I got into it, I just wanted to play casually and not get too much into it, and then. Look at you now.
Yeah.
Oh, look, there's somebody behind you, Elaine. That's gone now.
Yeah, that's my brother.
Okay, so that was back in 2019. So that was very early days, yeah? Like Welcome to Wraith.
Yeah, pretty much. We just started off. I immediately felt sort of, Katsu fit my playstyle pretty well. It was good fun. It was funny. While I was waiting for my cards to arrive from the store as well, we were just sort of, I was playing a few games against Carol. We'll just prox up the legendaries when we're playing on the kitchen table while we wait for our cards to arrive. But the funny thing is, because I wasn't that aware of the cards, I hadn't read them all properly. So I had stuff like Findale Spring Tunic. I just assumed you could go up to an unlimited number of counters. I was playing Mask of Momentum. I was playing Mask of Momentum as Battle Worn. So it's like, well, all the other legendaries have Battle Worn, so I just assumed it would be the same. It was great because Carol was playing Bravo, so we had some, in hindsight, pretty funny games that were very close. And then on the final turn, I removed like 9 counters from my Spring Tunic to get 3 resources. And he's like, does it work that way? I'm like, yeah, man. Yeah, yeah, man, definitely. And then like, he gets me down to 1 life, and my Mask of Momentum has like 2 Battle Worn counters on it. I'm like, oh, that was a pretty close game, bro.
Really? Maybe 4 turns ago I would have been dead, but that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So it was very fun because for a bit of context as well, Carol and Tom and some of my other friends who are devs now as well, like Rohan stuff, for example. These are guys I've known since I was about 14 or 15 years old.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, and so we've played games like quite a lot through high school, and then like a little bit on and off through uni. But I've known these guys forever, so it was quite funny.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that there was that much history because you've been talking about Carol, and I don't know if Elaine's aware that Carol's a dev and been around for donkey's years, like yourself, with the testing and whatnot. But there's a whole crew of you that went to school together. Did you go to school together?
Yeah, it's actually quite funny. Like, Tom went to a different school, but we sort of knew him through high school as well. But yeah, I mean, Tom, Carol, myself, and Rohan actually lived together in our first flat for about 3 years as well. So these guys I've known for a long time. It's funny, sometimes at work I'll just sort of pinch myself and be like, hey, I actually get to do this for a job. This is amazing. I love it.
Yeah, with your friends. Even better.
Yeah, exactly.
We're going to talk about that a little later, but yeah, I think you have what most people in this space would consider the dream job.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's very cool. Initially, sorry, I don't want to jump ahead of some of the questions, but I started in Premier OP, and then I sort of left because I was going to pursue sort of law. That was kind of an idea as a career because I had finished my law degree and finished getting admitted to the bar and all that.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
So I left and was sort of, started applying for a few positions. And then basically I think the week before I had some kind of interviews about to line up, I kind of, I was torn, and I chatted to my partner about it. She was extremely supportive and was just saying, no, just do what you enjoy, do what you love. If this is what you want to do, you should go for it. And then I ended up, I think, sending an email to James on Friday night saying, can I give you a quick call? And then I just said, hey, any chance I can come back? I love the game too much.
And he said, we'd love to have you back. Hi, am I?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was cool. It's like, I think we can rustle something up.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if we just rewind a little bit and, you living with Carol, and how did Session Blood sort of come about? Was that just passion for the game, or was it like sitting around playing like, oh my God, let's start a podcast or whatever?
A little bit like that, because the thing is, we have our group chats on Facebook and everything, and I feel with any new game, probably at the very start when you're first getting into it and really enjoying it, it's, I don't know, how would I describe it? Almost like a magical time, It's like it's always in your thoughts. Like you have heaps of fun talking about it and playing and stuff all the time and chatting about strategies. So Session Blood really just came out of that because we, so way back then they had like Road to Callings. We went to a few. Yeah, we went to a few of these. Like Carol, within about 2 weeks of us starting the game, we jumped in a minivan with 6 people that we didn't know that well. But if we look back now, it's quite funny because we had people like Matt Rogers and Cale McCreath, Alan Hale, who's North American OP manager. So we went for like a 7-hour drive in this minivan down to the city to play in a Road to Calling. But anyway, fast forward to 2020 when we started. So that was after the first Classic Constructor Calling in Auckland, and sort of the very first Road to National season was just starting. So there was like, started to get some data flowing in. And Carol and I were just saying, like, we talk about this game all the time anyway. Like, and then we sort of chatted about doing a podcast. Sometimes I kind of let things slide, but luckily Carol was there sort of pushing on, like, let's just do it. So one thing as well is that we, the game was pretty new, so there just weren't that many people playing back then, and there weren't that many content creators in the space. I think people like DM Armada and Red Zone Rogue who've been around for a very long time. Shout out for that to them. I think they were there, but on the competitive side of things, there wasn't that much, and there were people who are doing their best, and I have all the respect and will for them to put out some gameplay videos and things like that. But we just felt that, with all due respect, there was just certain like small things going wrong, like either just like rules things that weren't being picked up correctly, or just like minor gameplay mistakes that you do when you first start playing. And it sort of grew out of that. We're like, why don't we start a podcast to begin with to see if we can like help share a little bit of our knowledge with all the new players getting into the game, and then like maybe we'll move on to some gameplay videos. But fun fact, the very first Session Blood podcast ever, Carol came around to my apartment because we weren't living together anymore at that stage, and we just started drawing out a rough plan. I'm like, we'll just wing it. We'll see how we go. And we sat across from each other. I just put my phone down in the middle of the table and said, ready? 3, 2, 1, just hit record. And that was that. And I think we got like, we weren't even on YouTube. We just a pure podcast at that point from like Buzzsprout and Spotify. And I think our first one got like 25 or 30 downloads, and we were hyped. We're like, no way, 30 people listen to us. So that's basically how that all came about to begin with.
So you started and you got, very successful with Session Blood. You guys amassed a pretty large following and got a lot of views. And so what do you think was like the recipe for success to getting from recording on your little phone to 30 people listening to, thousands?
1,000.
You are now.
I think sort of consistency and trying to put out content out there that you feel people will be interested in. I feel back then, in all honesty, it was sort of much easier to build up a bit of a following because there was just much less in the space back then. So when we started, we were, I would say, one of the very few competitive focused podcasts. I know like other ones sort of started coming out not too long after that. I know like the Attack Action podcast, ones like that. Push the Point came out a little bit later on. I know Simon Hamish very well. Like shout out to them; they do a great job. In terms of success, I don't know. I feel like a bit of a fraud saying this is the path to success because I feel we were quite fortunate to be in there, kind of on the ground floor very early. So we managed to build up that following before there were too many. Before there was a lot more people in the space. Because I still remember talking to Hayden and Brendan a little bit, or mainly Hayden because he was from around these ways when they were starting up Arsenal Pass. And we absolutely loved it when they started their podcast because it was when we were sort of starting to tone down a little bit, I think. I think we were still going when they started, but then as they started taking off a bit is when we started at LSS. But it was good because we absolutely loved their podcast. But I remember seeing it when they had, that's a really good example as well. They had 50, 60 subscribers. They're putting out these very high quality videos and getting like 100 views. And so we always did our best as well at the start and end of our episode saying like, as far as community shout-outs go, Arsenal Pass, come on, people, you've got to check them out because we're like, cool. This is criminal. These guys are amazing and people aren't tuning in, but they just stuck with it. They were consistent. They kept putting out, weekly content every single week. They've got a very good structure to their podcast, probably a lot better than ours, to be honest. The Session Blood with, the time spans, they always follow a similar pattern. So I feel just consistency and finding your spot, something you enjoy talking about and something that you feel people might want to listen to. That's probably the key. I know it probably sounds a little bit cliche, isn't super helpful, but that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think maybe some people would say that's cliche, but honestly, like being creator in the space, that's the best advice you can give. Just consistency and quality, just something Melody and I are still working on.
Yes.
But we are getting there. I mean, it's not easy starting off being a content creator and like trying to find your way in the space, and it takes like the consistency and the push to just keep going and keep making videos because Session Blood, I don't think you give yourself enough credit. You guys also produced great videos. Some of the first that I started watching when I sat down and was like, okay, how do I play this game? Let me do some research here. And like Arsenal Pass, there are a lot of really good content creators out here. Um, let's
Yeah, I
see.
think that was honestly one of the most rewarding things is just over time with Session Blood, like particularly when we were going quite strong, the game started picking up a bit. Just people reaching out and say like, hey, one of the first things we had a Rhino vs Katsu video as one of our very first ones, and people saying, hey, like that's one of the first gameplay videos I watched that really helped me get into the game. Or like we listened, one of our early podcasts that is probably one of our most listened to this day was a Dealing with Dorinthia podcast, which was back in the sort of Arcane Rising Crucible of War days when Dorinthia was a bit of a menace, and
A menace.
she's a difficult one to defend and block against. So we played a lot against Dorinthia, so we decided to put that podcast out, and it was always really nice hearing from people that like, just people reaching out with their stories and saying, I always struggled, then I listened to the podcast and I went to my local armory and I managed to beat the Dorinthias, and we were like, awesome! Like this is why we do what we do. We just want to try share a bit of knowledge and help people out.
It must have been tough having to sort of not, or I guess not's not the right word, but having to step away from Session Blood because you moved into LSS.
A little bit, yeah, tough? A little bit because, I think so. It was a little bit tough because when we started at LSS, it became a lot more difficult. Like we tried to pivot a bit to doing a couple of interviews here and there. Like our last one was with I believe Jason Lai and Justin Wong talking about their prison deck, which they played to great success.
Mm-hmm.
But when it came to talking about competitive, it's difficult because even if we're not saying things that are sort of particularly groundbreaking, it could just be the optics or the impression of like, oh, is this like coming from LSS internal data and stuff like that. Because I really enjoyed doing the podcast and I found it a lot of fun doing it with Carol. So, hopefully we'll bring it back for some special episodes here and there these days. But yeah, a little fun trivia fact as well: the Session Blood opening theme, which Carol created, which I love, but the Session Blood sound on that is actually both him and his fiance saying it and then doing echoes of it. So,
really
fun fact for people out there. Yeah. So when it goes Session Blood, that's fiance does a lot of the voice for that. So, Chi-Chi, imagine you're not listening to this, but if you do, shout out to you.
And so, what are your thoughts around how the content has evolved? Like, I mean, you've been around since day dot.
Oh, the content out there is just amazing these days. I think there's honestly like some. I feel like I get myself in trouble by not name dropping like all of the awesome ones out there, but just a few small examples. I feel like Fabrica, for example, they do an awesome job. There's Fabled Academy, the Attack Action podcast, the Card Guys, Push the Point, yourselves as well. Awesome, I love it. Obviously, have to mention Arsenal Pass, who I feel are kind of, I would say, probably the most well known or one of the most successful podcasters out there, and I think they do a really good job putting out consistent content. And then obviously you have people like Red Zone Rogue and DM Armada who have massive followings, who both really nice guys, both have been around since way, way, way back in the very beginning. And then I feel like, I don't know, every day on Facebook I jump on and there's like new podcasts and new other things jumping up. So I think the content creation space is in a really, really good spot. Lots and lots of really cool stuff out there. Also more localized things coming out. I've seen ones coming out in other languages as well, which I think is super cool. I think their podcasts they do it in English and French sometimes, but I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, but Iva Fidia, French, with Pierre Carnales. I was going to try to say it in French, but I was like, if he listens, he'll be shaking his head at me. But, also ones coming out in all over the world, Poland, Hong Kong, the States, Taiwan, everywhere you can think of. So it's great. I really, really like it.
And I think that's kind of the sign that Flesh and Blood is really growing, right? When you start getting, it's not just America, New Zealand, Australia, when it's broadening out to other languages, Europe, the whole shebang, and we're getting a lot of content from these places, I think that's a huge indicator. Well, for me, it is.
Oh, geez, I almost forgot Tall Timmy. Tall Timmy and Flukenbox
Tall
as well,
Timmy.
from over Australian ways. Absolutely love those guys as well. So keep doing what you're doing.
Yes, with the Funder.
Yeah, the Funder podcast.
Very,
Yep.
very fun podcast to listen to. Talk to me, I mean, yeah, they're hilarious. I got to meet them both in New Jersey, and got to meet most of the people you mentioned in New Jersey. That's the other things. Like everyone in I love the content being produced around Flesh and Blood right now. I consume Flesh and Blood content like nobody's business, but also the people behind making the content are just like some of the best, most supportive people. Very, very lucky to be in the content community. Okay, so you are a game developer for LSS, so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But as I already mentioned, I think to most people in Flesh and Blood who play Flesh and Blood, that is like the dream job. So talk to us a little bit how you actually came into that position. How did you land that job, that role?
So I feel it's probably, it came out, I imagine, like a little bit connected to the Session Blood podcast, I feel, because we had a bit of a following in the community at that point, and I feel James may have been kind of generally aware of us from there. And also, I feel, I don't know, I can try to say this without bragging or anything, but we managed to put up some decent results in events and stuff like that over. So in the very first constructed calling, I managed to come second. I got taken down by Sasha Markovic, the man himself, in the final. It was a really great game. Really enjoyed that one. And he's playing the Katsu control deck, which was very much a novelty back then, which people weren't aware of. And then I was fortunate enough to make the top 4 at Nationals, the first New Zealand Nationals the following year, which was also a fun little story there is that Carol was very keen to come down to that. He'd been working on a Rhinar deck for a very long time. He was a bit of sort of a brute player. And Dash was kind of the absolute format menace, to use that word again at the moment, was just like absolutely crushing everything. And Arg Smash had just come out in Crucible of War, so finally a way to kill the Chambers. So Carol been playing for ages. I was just toiling away on my other decks like Katsu and Viserai and banging my head against the wall. But when the national date was announced, it ended up being, I think, within about 2 or 3 days of his daughter's expected due date. So he's like, yeah, there's probably no way I can make it down. I was like, oh, could there be a conversation? He's like, no, there won't be a conversation around that. But basically, the week of the event, I ended up switching into his Rhinar deck. Because I just wanted a way to kill the Chambers, not lose to Dash. And it was funny because I was a little bit out of practice with it because I hadn't played it that much. I was just getting a speed run with it, asking him all the questions. But then when we were down at Nationals, he was in the hospital, and occasionally between like rounds or like the rounds would go up, and I'm like, I'm pairing against this person this deck, and I'd get my phone out and call him, and he'd be in the hospital room. I was just like, Carol, I'm playing into a Rhinar mirror. What do? And he's like, all right, just go 60 cards, do this, and this. And he's like, all right, I've got to get back in the room. I'm like, all right, sorry, bro, see ya.
Oh my gosh.
I hope the baby's okay.
Yeah, luckily Chi-Chi has forgiven me, so it's okay.
Wow.
But yeah, I have to make sure I get their daughter a nice birthday and Christmas present each year.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, I tend to ramble and go off on tangents, but back to the actual question.
That's hilarious.
So I think a little bit of it came from there. So James just reached out to Carol and myself because we were invited into the studio to record a couple of Blitz games, and then he just had a talk to us after saying, hey, look, guys, would you like to do just sort of a dev, a part-time dev contract for a product? It'll be from this month. And we said, yeah, absolutely. We'd love to do that. So, yeah, so we kind of did that. It was as I was finishing off my degree as well, because I sort of went back to uni to finish that off. And then, yeah, so we just kind of went from there. And we ended up staying for about 3.5 months. And then at the end, they extended us kind of full-time offers. So Carol stuck around in Dev. I was kind of given the choice between Dev and Premier OP, organized play / Premier organized play. And yeah, as much as I really, really love Dev, and I did love it, I thought Premier OP could be quite an exciting challenge with the game sort of taking off in the way it was with all the events going on around the world. So I kind of moved into that area.
Okay, so this is going to segue into our next question, because I'm dying to know what a day in the life. It's actually just a day in the life at LSS, but what do you do on a day-to-day as a dev, and what did you do as in the Premier OP space? Like, what does that involve?
Okay, I might start with the Premier OP quickly, and I'll just go through this. The Premier OP was every day was a little bit different because I was there for basically when we had our first global national championship series, because the first year was just New Zealand and Taiwan, and then when I started that year, we had it in like 26 countries or so, something like that. So, like I say, every day was a bit different because we were sort of creating the processes for things and actually organizing these things at the same time. So, on any given day, communicating with people from all over the world, from different countries, just putting, working with different partners like Channel Fireball to get the American calling started, those first 4 callings. It's hard to give a full breakdown of the exact day, but we'd interact, we'd have meetings with the whole sort of general OP team and operations, work through, set up meetings throughout the day, reply to some emails, get all these events in place, create structures for the events and everything. So
it's like event management.
Yeah, that's definitely event management. I was a bit of a shock to the system because I hadn't organized a whole lot of events before, and within about a month of being there, they said, "All right, Kieran, we're having the Monarch Seal deck calling at the AATS Center in like 4 months' time or something." That's you. Get onto it. So,
here you go. Sort it out.
That was a bit of a crash course in event management for me. But yeah, that's sort of Premier OP in a bit of a nutshell. But I imagine game dev is what people might be a little bit more interested in, the exciting side. Yes. So game dev as well, it can very much change from day to day depending on what we're working on or what we're testing, or if we're looking at sort of meta game balance or that kind of thing. But usually it will start off in the morning with just a discussion about, and again, I'll have to be a little bit vague, but just a discussion of basically the goals we want to achieve today. For example, these you group of people, can you work on creating like these type of decks? And, other people, we want you to do this and that, testing. When we do testing for limited, I always find that really enjoyable, getting to do a bit of seal deck and draft and things like that. And, always a little bit of friendly competition and stuff going on. But yeah, a lot of it involves, it's quite a cool, I really enjoy the working environment, very collaborative. So, might be working on a deck and then you kind of walk over and watch someone else play and just have a discussion about, I just played X versus Y and I'm trying out like A, B, and C. And they're like, well, have you thought of trying D, E, and F? And you're like, whoa. But just sort of, tinkering around with their different decks. And it's quite cool as well because, we do keep an eye on what the community is playing. And for example, if someone comes through with a very successful deck, we may sort of build it up in the office and run it into some other decks around here to get a feel for how it goes. So, maybe a thing for all you deck builders out there. You never know if it's really successful, yours might end up in the LSE Scotland at some point.
In the office. So do you literally, you just play all day? Are you typing notes or I'm really interested to know how it works.
So usually what will happen is it can change a little bit between limited and constructed testing. But for example, in constructed testing, quite a lot of it is playing a lot of games and then sort of giving feedback as we go along and then giving sort of more formal feedback towards the end of the day. So for example, like just across the course of the day, if things come up, if we just want to clarify sort of rules interactions, for example, with new with new stuff, to put it that way, to clarify how things are meant to work, or just give small suggestions like this feels a little bit funny. Maybe like, is it meant to be like this or this? That might be feedback that comes during the day. And then usually at the end of the day, like I say, it's a bit more of a people will start up like a thread and people will give like their thoughts on what they've been playing through during the day, or their suggestions, or just a general feel of how things are going on certain like heroes and things like that. I feel, like I say, I tend to ramble when I talk, and I don't know, I feel I tend to write sort of mini essays at times. So that's something I'm working on, being a little bit more succinct.
How many of you
I
are there?
love it.
Yeah.
That one I'm not sure if I'm meant to say or not. Sorry.
No, that's cool. Don't worry about it. It's all good. There's a team.
I can tell you, but I have to kill you.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Sorry, Elaine, I cut you off. You go.
No, you're good. I'm just like trying to contain my fangirling because
I'm visualizing what it's like here, and I'm like, okay,
I know,
cool.
I'm like, wow, just sitting there playing all day and getting paid to do that.
Yes,
and getting to play with like, new product and things that no one else is. It just sounds like a dream, honestly.
It must be tough though, like trying to, you can't talk about it. Kieran, I could only imagine people trying to be like, so, got any insider goss on what's coming? And you're like, no.
That's the thing. You probably want to say so bad because it's like you're excited and you love the game, obviously, but it's like you can't. Yeah, nope. That'd be difficult. Nope. And we're not gonna.
Gotta keep it all.
We
might
have to leave this part in, Melody.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that.
You're gonna be like, "Oh my gosh, look, he's changed location."
To your point, Elaine. I think most people are pretty good about it. To be honest, they kind of appreciate that you can't give too much away. Like I say, fortunately, some of my sort of closest friends, actually work there, so I can I can at least talk to them about it and not get in trouble. A few people, just ask you a couple of things here and there, usually in a joking manner. I feel Kale McCreath, Guardian Legend. He's a bit of a classic one. He'll be like, "Oh yeah, because I'm getting this in the next set, aren't I?" And I'm like,
I can't say anything. Yeah,
exactly.
Twice.
Exactly. But he just says it all in good fun. But yeah, he's a funny one.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would never push to know something from anyone who works at LSS, but I'm just imagining myself in that position being like, that I want to tell you and you know that I can't, so please don't push it because I'm like, it just must be like exciting, to be able to be in that position as a game developer. But I'm sure there's also challenges. Ooh, segue. So what are some of your biggest challenges as being a game developer besides having to shoo off people who want to know things they can't know?
Because I feel for me it's interesting because I feel I'd probably be on the slightly newer side as opposed to people like Carol, Jacob Pearson, who's been around for a while now. Obviously Jason Chung, who Chris Gehring have been there since the very beginning, the real OGs of Fab game developers. But so part of that is just for me starting back up again after doing a brief stint in dev work is just getting a feel for kind of like what type of feedback to give. Just trying to feel confident giving your opinions and things sometimes, going about that the right way. Because I certainly had a couple of things very early on of just like immediately being like, oh, like I don't like this and I don't like this and I would like these buffs. And it's quite good though because James sort of he's good at communicating through to us, particularly when we sat for some of the new devs coming along. just sitting down and explaining some of the sort of core tenets of his game design philosophy. So these are things to keep in mind as we're going through products. And one of the interesting things I feel for game development versus being a player is just getting a bit of insight into the different perspectives that you kind of need to have at times. Because I know as a player, because I was playing while I was away from the company, before the company, there'd be things if you're playing certain heroes or whatever, and you're just like, oh man, I really wish I had this card, or like this feels clunky, or that feels bad. But from a sort of game dev or game design perspective, sometimes you have to appreciate the kind of longer view of things. For example, and I think one example I can think of, and this isn't from LSS or James, it's just something I'm trying to relate to, is something like Viserai, for example. Viserai back in Arcane Rising and Crucible of War was not a particularly strong hero. Oh, yeah, that's weird. Oh, sorry. I'm just going to turn off my camera for 1 second. Viserai, was not a very good hero in particular back in Arcane Rising and Crucible. Really struggled in the meta game, particularly in Arcane Rising. Like I struggled away at. I struggled away at various tournaments. I just didn't have all the tools needed to compete with decks like Dash and Dorinthia and Reiner. I believe I went down to Wellington to play a Road to Nationals event, and I was determined to be the first person to top 8 an event with Viserai, and I struggled through all my rounds, and then in my very last round, I had to win to make it in. I just forgot about Arcanite Skullcap's second ability for Arcane Barrier, so I misblocked against a Warrior player and lost. And then I was like, I still might make it on tiebreakers. And then freaking Jacob Pearson, man, we had the exact same tiebreakers almost, but I came 9th, he came 8th. It was like 0.003% or something, some nonsense like that. But sorry, going back to the point, Viserai, I feel in Crucible of War got the card Movrian Skies, which I feel is now like a huge mainstay in the deck, and which really helped tie that deck together. But I think that's the thing and now Viserai is just, I feel, one of the very strong heroes in the meta. It was the most, I believe, I'd have to check this, but I think I saw a metagame breakdown somewhere. It was the most represented hero at the Calling Singapore. Players obviously really enjoy it. There's various different builds. There's like the Arsenal Positive Belittle Viserai build. There's a more traditional kind of build up a bunch of rune chants build. But I suppose what I'm trying to say here is like that's a hero that if you gave it all the tools right from the very beginning in Arcane Rising, like if you gave it the Movrian Skies, you gave it sort of a bunch of other things. I mean, I know Rosetta Thorn has played a part of that. It's a very powerful weapon. But things like Shriller Skull Form, for example, which came later, if all those cards had been in Arcane Rising, then maybe Viserai would just be absolutely busted back then, and you'd have to ban out cards, and then, it becomes harder to add in these very cool cards over time that make it like a really cool playable hero that is very strong. Oh, sorry, sorry, I just grabbed a couple of things for work as well.
No, that's like a really good point, and one that I think, like being on Twitter and stuff, you can see people are quick to, jump the gun on things, be mad about things, be like, oh, well, I can't believe they're doing this. Like, I can't believe this is happening. Like, this hero is way too strong. Like, ban. And I've kind of just learned that LSS and James White and you guys know what's going on a lot better than I do as a player. And I'm like, I just trust the process, every time something happens, James White comes out and is like, well, that's happening because this, like, or we decided to do that because X, Y, and Z, and it's like, oh, that makes sense. So I think that's a really good point. And every time I go through and like reorganize my cards, which I just recently did, I like will pull out a card. And I'm like, I've never seen this card before. Like, what does this do? And I read it and I'm like, it doesn't seem good into anything. But then I always have this thought in the back of my mind that's like, I can't wait till the day that this card like has a place in its deck, because I know it wasn't made without some kind of like, in the future, this will be used for this type of deal. Every time I see a card that I don't recognize or a game mechanic that I don't like, I'm like, I can't wait till the point in the game where this is relevant, because I feel like everything will have its time.
Yeah.
That's all the Azalea players out there. You'll have your time.
And the data doll players.
The data.
But yeah, absolutely. And our Data Doll players, shout out to Reese from New Zealand. They're a big Data Doll fan. So, but I think that's a really good point, Elaine. I think cards sort of can flow in and out of the meta sometimes, and yesterday's trash is maybe tomorrow's treasure for certain things. There's certain cards. I think cards like Enchanting Melody. Yeah, shout out to Melody here as well. I feel that card has been very good in certain meta games and certain decks, and then completely useless in other ones. So back, like I say, in the sort of Crucible of War days, that had its moment for Arcane Race Crucible of War, that had its moment in Dash decks for a little bit. Who played it against decks like Warrior, because Enchanting Melody prevents damage. It sits there on sits there in play. And for defending against Warrior, you don't have to activate Reprise by just leaving it there. I think it also found a bit of play in decks like Viserai for a little bit. I was always a big champion of it in Viserai when they were able to pivot into that OTK with Bloodsheath Skeletor and Sonata. I always really liked it because it was a non-attack action. It had Go Again, so it would help set up your hero ability to turn on Rune Chance, and it would allow you to keep, have a 6-card hand almost, because you have that in play as a defending card. You have your full 5-card hand. Really allows you to take turns off here and there to build up those Rune Chants. I haven't seen many Enchanting Melodies recently.
I've never seen that in gameplay ever.
Yes. So, I mean, I just, maybe not the best example ever, but it was just something that came to mind as a card that, maybe was quite good in a few niche situations. Maybe it's not played so much at the moment, but, who knows? Maybe it'll come back one day.
Yeah.
And so what's your favorite part of being a game dev?
That's a tough one. I mean, getting to play games for a living was a pretty good one. It'd be pretty high up the list, I'm not going to lie. And very much a bonus getting to work with some of my, longtime friends from high school. And honestly, everyone at the office, I really enjoy working with. We got a good mix of people, and I think they're all very great in their own ways. I suppose one cool thing is getting to be part of that kind of exploratory phase of testing a new metagame very intensely and very early on, because so things like even testing for a draft format or testing for a new constructed metagame, be that Blitz or CC or anything. I feel when a new set comes out, that's often one of the more exciting times around. So because you're playing with all these new cards, you're like, oh, maybe I'll try this draft archetype, or maybe this is the way to build the deck and things like that. And one of the things as a player is I feel you need to kind of fit that around your real life commitments or your real world commitments. I'd love to spend kind of 8 hours sitting down and playing the new things, but I had to go to work or something, for example. I fully appreciate. But that's what I love about game dev is that's literally your job. You sort of go into work and you're like, okay, I'm going to build this deck and I'm going to, play it for a bunch of hours and then go have lunch and then come back and make a bunch of tweaks, talk to some like-minded, very, very good players on their thoughts and everything, and get to chop and change all these things. And, similar thing for draft, you draft something, you're like, wait, that might be a good idea for an archetype, and then you get to try it in the next draft, or you see someone else try something and you're like, oh, I feel I can replicate that and maybe add my own little twist on. That's great fun. I feel I'm definitely very much I don't know, back in times when I've done sort of a bit of draft testing here and there, certainly a bit of a strategy borrower, if we put it nicely. If I see something good, I'll borrow it and and then I'll try it out. So, but yeah, that's some of the stuff I really enjoy about game dev.
It sounds amazing. It sounds absolutely incredible. Getting to,
I know. I was almost speechless. I'm that just sounds so fun. That just sounds like the best job. So what do you have any advice for listeners who their dream job, dream role would to be doing what you're doing? Do you have any advice for
skills,
them?
experience? Like, what sort of CV do you need to get into a role like yours?
That's a good question, honestly. A really good question. I think, and I'll do my best to answer, just say maybe take it with a grain of salt, because as I say, my path through to game dev was probably, I was quite fortunate with just kind of like timing and, location and all that kind of thing, since I live in Auckland, which is where LSS is based. But I suppose probably my best advice could be is that is basically working on your game. So like working on like how you play, stuff like if we use Flesh and Blood, for example, and being, I feel like, I don't know. It's tough for me because I wouldn't say I necessarily know the qualifications or, what James or the company necessarily is looking for as part of a game dev. So, I could give an answer and then, James keeps sitting there shaking his head being like, what's this guy on about? But I mean, I guess from my perspective is maybe like a couple of angles would be like, one, just working on your sort of deck building and gameplay, because I feel if you're a sort of, if you're doing quite well as a player in the community, that could be a way to get noticed. Or if you build the deck that is sort of the one that breaks the meta at a couple of tournaments in a row, plus you'd really like to work as a game dev in New Zealand, and plus you're putting up results, then that would probably certainly help your cause if you reached out and said, hey, I'd love to do this. But yeah, and also I feel being involved in the community side would never hurt it as well, because like if on top of being a pretty good player and deck builder, you're also someone, who creates content or is helping out newer players and stuff like that, or just being a generally good person, I feel that's something that would definitely help your case. But yes, sorry, I'm just being a little bit vague because honestly, I'm not sure if I'm the most qualified to answer that, because like I say, I think I was a little bit fortunate for how it all came about for me. But I see, just speaking generally, I feel maybe I could say those things I mentioned couldn't hurt. For example, if there was a opening available and you were applying, I feel having that on your resume wouldn't hurt.
All right, we're going to move on to a little bit of Pro Tour hype, because that is this weekend, and it feels like the whole world is excited to watch the Pro Tour in Lille this weekend. Obviously, it's just the world of Flesh and Blood, but everyone's excited. We're not going to talk, just for all the listeners, about the best position deck and all that, because we don't want to get Kieran fired, obviously.
We'll get him in trouble.
Or maybe look silly when I'm wrong.
Yeah. You're not going to get anyone in trouble, but we're all excited for Pro Tour, so let's talk about it a little bit. First, do you have anything that you want to talk about like an event at this scale and what's going on, because you worked in the organized play? So, what's your perspective on the tournament?
A lot of work goes into these events. I mean, to be honest, the first Pro Tour, I didn't sort of have a large role in curating that, because the new premier OP person had taken over by then. But I did have a bit of experience working with putting together some of the first round of American callings and New Zealand callings, things like that. But yeah, I will say like a lot of time and effort and work goes into these to make sure that everything is up to speed, and it's looking good. Like, all the sort of event walls and event graphics around the venue, all the event branding, that kind of thing, making sure the coverage is sorted, getting all the run sheets sorted for the schedule, so we're not running over time. Just all the sort of logistic, making sure we've got all the product calculations, the prize walls, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in the background to make these events successful. So, just want to give a shout out to James, the operations team, and the organized play team, and all those people working that for putting these together for the players.
Yeah, and I mean, I got to go to the Pro Tour 1 in New Jersey. I'm not going to Lille, but they do a great job. So, as a game developer, do you think that the meta is like? Do you like how open the meta is right now in the field? If you can't say anything, don't say anything. But I just know some people complain that the meta is like too open, because there is no what feels like there's no clear cut like best deck. But I kind of think this is what a meta should look like. Do you agree with that? Or
I actually personally feel like the meta game's in a very cool spot at the moment. I was actually at the first Pro Tour as well, and I think even then when the meta game looked somewhat closed because there were, I think, kind of like the big three decks of Starvo, Prism, and I think like Briar was probably the third big deck, unless I'm forgetting back then. But then you have things out of nowhere, like for example, we had 2 Kanos in the top 8.
Yes.
And which is really, really cool. So I think in closed metas, there's more opportunities for rogue decks to come out. But in saying that, I feel like I think this meta, personally, looks even cooler than the previous one, because there was like a lot of Starvo and stuff like that back then, and a lot of people didn't love playing to Starvo. I think it's probably fair to say, but I think this meta game at the moment is very cool, because it seems to me that there are like a lot of viable decks out there. I mean, we just saw a sort of aggro boost dash speed its way to max, at max velocity to a
Wombat dash.
Yeah, that was so honestly, I was watching that coverage. I know like a lot of the devs and stuff were watching it. James was at the event himself. That was awesome to me to see this dash just like putting the absolute pressure on these traditional aggro decks and just saying, deal with my Teklo pounders and stuff like that. So I think the metagame's in a very cool spot. We also saw Icelander win the Battle Hardened event.
Yes.
I know there's a content creator. Yeah, I know there's a content creator who's feeling well known. I think he goes by Ethnic Smoke as his kind of YouTube or content creator name, who played Icelander.
Yeah, he's the Icelander.
Yeah, and he played Icelander to top 8 at the calling events. So I think there's these decks that maybe people weren't necessarily expecting to perform as well as they did, that are really stamping the mark on the metagame. So, I mean, look, I feel if you asked a lot of people before the Singapore calling, hey, what do you think is going to win the calling and the Battle Hardened event, there wouldn't be a whole lot out there who said, oh, it's going to be Dash and Icelander.
No, not at all.
So, yeah.
Especially with, Talish, I mean, that was so cool to watch.
Yes, I know. I think some people call it Wombat Dash. I feel like Dalashar is not a bad name either. but yeah, I think the metagame, to me, I feel like it looks like it's a really cool spot with like a lot of different viable decks, and you never know as well. There's always these rogue decks on the horizon that people, start to forget about. Their memory fades a little bit, and then like we saw at the first Pro Tour, I think there were maybe 7 Kanos or even less. I think 5 or 6 Kanos in the entire field of players. And I think 2 made top 8, and about 4 of them made the top 32. So, yeah, not to say that will be like the rogue deck this time around, but you never know. You never know what will pop up at the Pro Tour.
Yeah, honestly, watching the calling just made me more excited for the Pro Tour because, like you said, it was just not the results I was expecting. No Prism in the top 8 kind of surprised me, and only 1 Viserai also surprised me. There was more Briar, and then Icelander and Dash, and then Dash to win the whole thing. And I was like, wow, now I can't wait to see what happens at Pro Tour, because I kind of thought I knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And I feel like I was proven wrong. So with Pro Tour, you went to Pro Tour New Jersey, correct?
Yeah, I actually played at Pro Tour New Jersey because it was kind of in between when I left Premier and then like OP and then came back as a game dev, because it was about I think 3-ish or so months after I left, and so I think I had enough distance from the company at that point. Plus, I didn't have anything to do with game dev for probably well over a year at that point because I was all in Premier OP. So honestly, I was a little rusty. I feel, but I had a great time. I managed to make day 2. Probably didn't do quite as well as I wanted to on day 2, but it was a really great time. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, I was there. It was awesome. I make the joke that it was basically like a big field of flowers that I felt like I was skipping through the whole time because I was just like on cloud 9 that entire time. I mean, Pro Tour 1, at least from attendees and like a player standpoint, seemed like a massive success. There was so many things to do, from the players banquet to artist booths, sellers, cosplay contests, side events, calling, obviously the main event, the Pro Tour. Was there anything that like really stuck out to you at that event that you thought went like exceptionally well, or maybe something that you guys at LSS or you personally are hoping goes a little bit better this time around, like between Pro Tour 1 and Pro Tour 2?
I thought the players banquet was a really great idea, to let players sort of mix and mingle a little bit before the main event. Like I got to sort of wander around and chat to a whole lot of people that I'd only met online, and just sort of say hello and introduce myself. I thought, James always puts in a absolutely massive effort at these events. I think it was really. I think it was really great to see him just be like, I think everyone knows he's very community focused, but just at the players banquet, for example, it was actually his birthday on that day, and then
Really?
That's
yeah,
right.
it was,
Yes.
it was, and then it was funny because one person came up and asked, "Hey James, can I get a photo?" And James is, a really great guy, and he knows that players don't get that much of an opportunity to meet him all that often. So he said, yeah, no problem. And then another person came up, and then I looked over 3 minutes later, and there was about a 45-person line. And then I circled back an hour and a half later, and the line was still going. So he was just absolutely swamped. So I think the player banquet, I feel people getting to meet James. James. Like just taking questions all day, hanging out with people. I thought one thing that was done really well is having a bit of a mix of something for everyone at the Pro Tour. So it's not just about the hyper competitive players. So you have things like you have a whole bunch of side events, for example. You have the artists signing cards, selling prints, that kind of thing. You have the cosplay contest as well,
Yes.
which I know, Elaine, you do a bit of cosplay yourself.
Yes.
Might be sort of up your alley. They had that sort of thing, battle hardens and callings for people who sort of don't make day two of the Pro Tour. So I think they did a really good job of just making it very something for everyone, quite vibe. As far as things that could be improved, I don't know. I wasn't so much in the production side of things. I recall hearing there was some things in the community about there may have been like a small delay in the calling side, and there was maybe a little bit of confusion about getting calling tickets for Pro Tour players who didn't make day. But I think that's something that, in fairness, that there's probably a little bit of misunderstanding, perhaps on the players' side, maybe a little bit on Alice's side. But I think that's something that, when we see that sort of thing, we make a conscious effort to do a bit of analysis and say what went wrong there, how can this be improved next time. And I think that's why for Lille, for example, there's a lot of things going up that saying, look, the calling is selling out. Like there's multiple things going on social media. I think it's like 75, 80% sold. So if you're going to Lille and haven't got your calling ticket, I'd recommend doing that right away. But then things like spots being reserved for players, all that kind of thing now. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was an issue, but it's also like a really cool thing to see, at least, like that most people did not expect it to sell out and be as big of an event as it was. And then there was people who just like couldn't get in, which of course is very unfortunate, but also it's like a massive success at the same time, like a double-edged sword, I guess.
A victim of success in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're gonna dig into our listener questions. We've got quite a few, so I'm going to pick one. This one comes from Sammy. Sammy's from Australia, and Sammy is in our Discord. And she's asked, as time goes on and the overall card pool gets larger, it must create some challenges with card design. Are you able to provide some insight into how new cards are tested and tweaked before release? You've kind of touched on it a bit, and maybe you can't really answer that question.
Yeah, I think basically what I've touched on is probably about as far as I can go on that one. Sorry. So basically, I think over the course of a development cycle, it's not like the set is given to the developers on day one, and then on day X, it's like, all right, nothing's changed, but here's some cool decks. Like things definitely change over the course of a cycle. I think that's part of our job as game devs to try and ensure that basically that the cards are in a very general sense balanced. That that things that we're not sort of breaking we're not breaking rules interactions. That we're not sort of we're trying to avoid. For example, like I don't know, an example from other games is like unintentionally printing like infinite combos and stuff like that, or just having some like really really oppressive thing that that just doesn't make for good flesh and blood.
Yeah.
I think one of them, like there's feedback on all angles, like multiple devs will build multiple versions of like the same deck, for example, to try and really, put it through the like a trial by fire to make sure that that things are okay. So I think someone's honking in the background of mine if that's coming through.
Can't hear that at all.
Yeah, so I know one thing you spoke of about challenges for game devs as well. I saw someone put it in a really interesting way. I think it was Brian Kibler, who's a former Magic player, really big Hearthstone streamer and stuff these days. I'm not sure if he came up with it, but he's saying that players will probably play more games in a single day or a single week than game devs can go through in an entire development cycle. So, like, well, that is certainly a challenge because there's like tens of thousands of more, hundreds of thousands more players than there are game devs. That we do our absolute best to make sure that that everything is in order before shipping out. That sometimes it's probably impossible to catch absolutely everything.
Yeah. All right. Our next question will go from Flake from the Instant Speed podcast. He says, without the ease of acquiring data from a digital client, what work is done by LSS to responsibly analyze metrics like hero, card play rates, and performances?
Yep. So, so I can answer this a little bit. So, because we are able to get a lot of data and information through GEM, the sort of the game like event management software. For example, in GEM these days there's fields, so we put in what we ask TOs to put in the heroes that each player is playing when they go through events. So there definitely is data analysis that we're able to get. We're able to get sort of like macro data on sort of rough metagame representation, some amounts of like matchup data, that kind of thing. I'm just a little bit wary of going into too much detail on that because I don't.
No, that's cool.
No.
Just because, I'm not too aware of. I don't want to give away any secret sauce or talk about processes that maybe I shouldn't. But I can say in a general sense that that data, it doesn't all just like disappear into the ether and like like that. That's that. I think you can see little bits of it come up in like metagame articles, snapshot articles. A whole bunch of people have written them. Someone I think of was one of the original stats guys is Tower Number 9, Davis Kingsley, who was doing it from way back. I know that when he's written some articles for Tab DCG, he's been given access to some amount of metagame data to help him write those. I think other writers are as well. But yeah, there is a lot of data collected, and a lot of it is like sort of analyzed and broken down and discussed. So the data is being utilized, but like I say, I probably can't go too much further than that. That's probably more of a thing I'd, he'd have to hit up James maybe at the Pro Tour panel, ask him about it there.
Yep, we not here to get you in trouble. I really like this question from Adam D, and it says, other than Flesh and Blood, yeah. Okay, other than Flesh and Blood, this comes from Adam D. He does a little bit of cosplay too at the Callings. He did the Ragamuffins hat. But he says, other than Flesh and Blood, this is, I'm assuming, outside of work. At work, you only play Flesh and Blood. But other than Flesh and Blood, is there any games that the design team enjoys playing together?
Oh, that's a funny one. One in particular is Wordle.
Wordle!
Wordle. We have the sort of lunchtime Wordle, and of course, because it's game devs and it's competitive, there's a Wordle leaderboard. Points assigned for winning in second, or if you don't complete it, you go into the negatives and stuff like that. I'll just leave it at saying that I am not particularly high up on the Wordle leaderboard. Which annoys me a little bit because I kind of think as myself, I've written so many essays and all these words and stuff over my time, and I like to think I have a decent vocabulary, but solving these Wordle puzzles, it does my head in sometimes. I'm just sitting there struggling away.
I love that Wordle.
But yeah, Wordle's certainly one, and I think aside from there's probably another, a couple of other ones out there as well. I know, a few of us play a little bit of Marvel Snap here and there, I think, which is fun, just as something a little bit different. But yeah, I think for all of us, I think Flesh and Blood is kind of the true love and passion. While I sometimes will enjoy playing some other games for a bit of a break here and there, and we have some other games we play together, I think Flesh and Blood is always the main one.
I love that. I was not expecting Wordle to be the answer to that question, but that's great. All right. Before we wrap things up, we have one more question we ask every guest on the show before we end. So, is there any topic or content that you would like to see on our podcast, the Pitch Perfect podcast, in the future? Anything we haven't covered already?
That's quite a tough one. I'm struggling off the top of my head to come up with a good one. But I feel just sort of, some interviews, like drawing in sort of people from different sections of the community, things like that. It's always a good one. So getting different perspectives. So, for example, you might have, me on as a game dev this week, and maybe sort of like a well-known cosplayer next week, and then maybe like a well-known like casual content creator the week after. So getting like a good spread of people. So it keeps things fresh. People like, who are we going to see on Pitch Perfect this week? Things like that. I think is cool. And I don't know, I just want to take the opportunity as well to say, like, I really appreciate. I saw in some of the notes you sent me through that. Part of your aims is to educate and empower and support the female community in Flesh and Blood. I honestly think that's very, very cool. I know that it's always really cool to see, more wahine, more women at these events, because I know my partner, we haven't played in a little bit, which is kind of my fault because I've been a little bit busy and I play at work all the time, but we played some Flesh and Blood together. She came to a few tournaments along with me as well. Like, she came to a few road to nationals. We drove to Wellington and back, which is about a 15-hour road trip a couple of times in 1 year. But I would note at some of these tournaments that, for example, sometimes she might be like the only girl there, or like one of two or three. And I think podcasts such as yours, I really think do a good job of helping make these spaces more accessible. And so I really enjoy that about yours. And I think it's really cool to see that we have some, hopefully like more and more women coming into the game and doing well and playing successfully as well. Like, I think it's good. I think there's some good examples of women actually like just crushing it around the world. I know we had people like Adrian, I think like Morales, apologies if I got your name wrong. She made the top 8 at the Auckland Battle Harden that I was casting recently. Melody, I know you made top 4 of your skirmish the other day. I saw that on Twitter. Big shout out to you as well.
Thank you.
But then there's obviously a ton that I'm not mentioning, but a couple others I know, like Laura Carr out of Australia. I know she plays quite well. I've seen her just like, drop the beat down on people at events. Obviously, I have to mention people like Yuki Bender, the Canadian national champion, who did really well at the Pro Tour and stuff like that. I don't know. I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I just think it's very, very cool what you're doing. I think it's very cool seeing these women come through on the competitive scene and do really well. I think it's really important not to try and like pigeonhole people into just certain areas. Be like, some of these people are, they're like just casual players, or just cosplayers, for example. Not that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I think it's really important to have all aspects of the community, but I think it's cool that we don't sort of stereotype and say, oh, like, this person isn't a competitive player, or, the classic, oh, are you here with your boyfriend, or did they teach you the game, or something like that. So, so, I don't know, anything that helps to sort of achieve those goals is really great. So I know that was a bit of a very long rambling statement, but I just wanted to throw that out there before we finish up.
Thank you.
So keep doing what you're doing, because I think it's really awesome.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
So do I.
Obviously, I know.
So just a side note, now you're talking about your partner, or can she play Flesh and Blood even though you work for LSS?
That's a good question, actually. I'm not sure. I think she hasn't played in quite a while, so I don't think she'd be looking to attend the Premier events just yet. I think things like skirmish, armory level, and all that, things where invites online are fine. That's a good question. I might have to go and ask someone at work today. Because she might actually get caught up because I'm a bit of a game dev. But so sorry, Ricky, if you can't play Battle Hardened at some point.
The only reason I ask is because I try to hunt down all the female players. I've been hunting them down. I put them all in a chat and we talk and just trying to connect up with women in New Zealand that play. Just wondering.
I'll mention that because we're going to get back into playing. So when we start playing a few games, I'll definitely connect you and say, there's a cool space to play within. And final thing I just want to say quickly is, speaking of cosplay and stuff, Elaine, I was talking to a TO the other day, actually, and I understand, hopefully not spoiling it, but you're going to be part of a cosplay event as part of an event in Columbus Ways, Ohio?
Yes, in Ohio. With the Realm Games is putting on another 10K, and we have a contest that's going up this week. It was supposed to post it last week. We're giving away a ticket on the podcast for all our listeners. But yeah, I've been helping organize that event because we're going to do like a cosplay side of it. I went to the last 10K and there wasn't a cosplay side of it. But I'm really excited to like get started on that one. I've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes that I don't know if I can't remember what I can say or what's already been revealed or not. But there will be a cosplay contest that I'll be doing there. And then I am almost done with my cosplay for nationals because I did qualify. We'll be playing at U.S. Nationals. And I'll also be in cosplay there as well. So I'm excited.
Awesome. No, it's cool to hear. No, I was chatting to Keith the other day. So we heard about this event and, keep your eye, watch the space, I think, because we're just seeing if there's, something that we might be able to help them out with as well to make the event even more exciting. And I'll leave it at that. But yeah, no, I spoke to Keith and your name came up. So I was like, hey, Elaine, I know Elaine. Well, maybe that's a bit loose.
Now we know each other a little better.
My father always makes fun of me because I'll be told a couple of times. So I'm like, oh yeah, my good friend, this person. And so I'm a bit loose with I know or my friend.
Me too. I at Pro Tour, I'm like, yeah, I spent the weekend with 600 of my best friends. Like what? I don't even know, but yeah, no, I'm the same way, so I totally understand. We know each other a little bit better now after this filming of this podcast, getting to talk to you a little bit more. It's been really great.
It has been.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I'm going to have to ask Keith about that. But thank you so much for coming on our show today and getting up early. And also just thank you for all the work that you do at LSS for this game of Flesh and Blood that everyone listening and that me and Melody love so much. But yeah.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed coming on today. Like I say, I really love your work, so keep doing what you're doing. One final very small thing is I just saw, because I had a quick look at the listener questions. I know we can't get through them with time, but I saw there was a question from Georgia, which probably can't answer, asking about an icy snapback or something. But I think if that's the Georgia from New Zealand,
yes.
It is. Okay, big shout out to you, Georgia. I saw her at Battle Hardened. She's been a long time community member, and you're awesome. So big shout out to you. And also, I know she's friends with Lynette, and so big shout out to Lynette, who's been one of the New Zealand cosplayers, one of the earlier Flesh and Blood cosplayers for a very, very long time. She did a really cool Lexi cosplay. She's also done Azalea and things like that before. So I just wanted to end by giving them a shout out because I love their work.
Yeah, I mean, I love both of them. I've gotten to know them like through our Discord and through Twitter, and just fantastic. Lynette, I knew before she knew me because, like you said, she was an original cosplayer. She was the first I ever saw cosplay. So, yeah. All right. Do you want to? I don't know if you. Usually, we give our guests the opportunity to plug themselves and what they're involved in.
Socials.
I guess we have the Session Blood channel. It's a little bit inactive for now, but if you want to have a sort of a glimpse into the past, I suppose, of some old Flesh and Blood things, or just have a bit of a laugh at me and Carol doing some recordings off our phones and everything, then feel free to check out our channel, Session Blood, on YouTube. Like I say, maybe we'll try bring it back at some point. But no, aside from that, I don't know. I just want to encourage people to go and support the content creators out there. Listen to Pitch Perfect, love them, and all your local ones. And stay tuned for the Protour Lille this weekend. I am super, super excited. I think I'm going to be, because it's in European time, I'm going to be up very late or very early, or one of those two, or both, over the weekend to watch it. But yeah, I'm hyped. So that's about it for me. I think that's everything. That's everything I have to say.
And Session Blood on Twitter, yeah.
Well,
they can.
Yes, Session Blood on Twitter. Although, funnily, it's kind of just me because Carol doesn't really tweet, so I got to add Session Blood. But maybe one day I'll change it to Mr. Classic. My community-given nickname, which I may or may not have invented for myself.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us this week. Thank you also to our listeners for listening this week. So, yeah, until next time.
Yeah. All right. Catch you later, everyone.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having us. Thanks for coming on.
No, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much.